In Game 5 of the Eastern Conference semifinals, the Philadelphia 76ers stormed out to a 26-point lead against the Atlanta Hawks. Joel Embiid was hitting on all cylinders, Ben Simmons was playing great defense and passing the ball to the right guys, and Seth Curry had stepped up by hitting 3 after 3. But just 2 hours later, the Hawks came storming back and stole a much-needed game in Philly. 2 games later, the Hawks did the same thing again, stunning the Sixers to advance to the Eastern Conference Finals. Ben Simmons was notoriously criticized for his refusal to shoot the ball in both of those games. He only shot the ball 8 times total, highlighted by giving up a free dunk to pass it to Matisse Thybulle. After the Game 7 stunner, Doc Rivers was then asked about Ben Simmons' ability to be a championship point guard.
Yeah, David, I don't know that question or the answer to that right now. So I don't know the answer to that.
Now, Doc might not be wrong, but this in itself has been a pattern throughout his career. The team will collapse, the star doesn't play well, and Doc will then throw them under the bus. So why do Doc teams always collapse? And why do stars seem to play poorly with him when it really matters most? This is the coach that wastes star talent. Early in Doc Rivers' career, he was known as one of the premier coaches in the NBA. During his stint in Boston, he won them their first championship since 1986 and were serious contenders for the next 4 years. When he moved out west, the Clippers immediately became the third best team after the Spurs and Thunder and were always in the championship conversation. However, what people remember most is his failures. In 2010, the Celtics had an 11-point lead against the Lakers in Game 7, but they ran out of gas and eventually blew that lead. In 2015, the Clippers were on the brink of their first ever Western Conference Finals, but blew a 20-point lead in Game 6 and collapsed against the Rockets. What got lost during that time is that Rivers was not only blessed with good talent, but also very high IQ players. In Boston, Rajon Rondo often took charge of the offense, as he often sensed what each player needed and put them in the best positions to succeed. In LA, Chris Paul did the same thing, setting up guys like Blake Griffin and DeAndre Jordan. Because they were so good at managing the offense, a lot of people associated that success with Doc Rivers since he's the coach. Where Doc really deserves his credit is how he empowers role players, especially shooters. As weird as it sounds, Doc's ideal offense is a motion-based offense. He often loved having shooters on his roster because he could continuously run them off screens. And for role players who often can't find their own shots, this was a perfect way for them to make an impact on the offense. In Boston, that worked perfectly because he had Rondo, who was a pass-first player and one of the best shooters in Ray Allen. And in LA, we saw the same thing with Chris Paul looking for JJ Redick off screens. So not only did this offense get role players very much involved, the main star also wasn't compromised. This created a great balance in the offense and helped both the Celtics and Clippers have great success in the regular season. However, once he wasn't blessed with an intelligent point guard, we started to see some of those cracks. In fact, his biggest flaw may be how he prioritized role players over stars. When he ran plays, they would mostly be geared towards shooters for them to find open space for shots. But when it came to the stars, he often let them figure it out by themselves. In theory, it makes a lot of sense, but it's also the reason why his teams have notoriously collapsed. And the two best case studies are Ben Simmons and Paul George. What makes Simmons a challenging player is that he's not comfortable shooting the ball. Because everyone knows that, they often sag way off of him and wait for him in the paint before they really start defending him. In the Hawks series, they stuck John Collins on Simmons, which neutralized him in the half court. So as the series went on, Simmons found himself more in the dunker spot and rarely got any opportunities to make a real impact. In Game 5, this became a particular dilemma, with Simmons only taking 4 shots because Seth Curry was on fire from all the plays that Doc Rivers called for him. In fact, he actually scored his career high in this game with 30 points, and while that's great, Doc had essentially handed him the keys to the offense in the fourth quarter, and that's where his failure to think as a coach ended up hurting them. What was shocking is that Doc never considered using Curry's gravity and hot night to open up more touches for Simmons. Instead, he had Curry run point, which forces him to be a ball handler, something that he's not really comfortable with. and he was running pick and roll with Embiid, but he had to move out to the three-point line because Simmons was already occupying the paint. And this misfit was really obvious on the final play. Down 3, it's Shake Milton, not Ben Simmons, who has the ball, with Curry running a ghost screen. He ends up being free, but because Milton's just following the play, he finds Harris instead, while Simmons is just standing in the dunker spot. Curry never got the ball, and the Sixers ended up losing that game. The whole night, the Sixers never considered a two-man game with Simmons and Curry. By sticking Simmons in the dunker spot and running most of the offense through Curry, the Sixers gave him almost no real opportunities to be part of the offense. Sure, Simmons has his own flaws, especially at the free throw line, but instead of being used as part of the solution, he was largely left out of the equation. This was also quite apparent in the bubble when Paul George had some of his worst playoff games against the Denver Nuggets, and Paul George had described the misfit as well.
The way I was being used, I felt like I was, Doc was trying to play me as like a Ray Allen or like a JJ Redick, like all pin downs, all like, I can do it, but that ain't my game. Like, you know what I mean? I need some flow. I need some mixes of pick and rolls. I need some post ups,
all that.
Just different touches. You know what I mean?
Just like Ben Simmons, Doc preferred to put Paul George and at times Kawhi off the ball and let role players initiate the offense. Now, I'm all for trying to put stars in different spots on the floor, but without a real motion shooter, Doc decided to stick Paul George in that role to try and set him up. The issue is that without a threatening player on the ball, teams can predict and sell out to George who's trying to get the ball. This makes the offense much more predictable, especially when teams really start dialing in on all of your plays. Now, Paul George needs to make some of these shots, but as PG mentioned, Doc didn't quite allow him to use his full skill set by putting him off the ball too often. Again, Paul George deserves a lot of criticism for that series, but his poor performance overshadowed how much Doc Rivers played a part in it as well. The reality is that stars typically prefer to keep the offense more simple so that they could trust their innate abilities. The reason is that once you have enough time to see the opposing team's playbook, you can figure out how to stop it.
With the Clippers, our offense was so potent. Like, we was just nice, like clicking. Our offense with the slip screen and going to get JJ and threes, every time we played against any other team, we killed them with that. But when we played against Golden State and they switched screens and did all this stuff, we couldn't run none of our stuff.
When we played the Warriors.
Doc would be like, move the ball. Why you ISO? Move the ball. And I'd be like, ain't nobody open.
In our last video, I talked about how LeBron and Rondo won the Lakers the finals by constantly putting their teammates in the right positions, but they were really just running pick and rolls to open things up. The reality is that very few players are very capable of doing that on a consistent basis, which is where the coach needs to come in. In the 2023 semifinals against the Celtics, the Sixers had gone up 3-2 in the series because Joel Embiid had taken advantage of the Celtics' lack of size. With only one big man on the court, Embiid knew there was no one behind Horford that could help, which allowed him to get good shots. Harden and Embiid had also run pick and roll to get Horford moving, and Embiid was able to consistently score in his sweet spots. But starting in Game 6, Joe Mazzulla made the adjustment by inserting Rob Williams into the starting lineup to give Horford more support on the backside, and that completely changed the equation. Take a look at these three plays. Embiid is posting up Horford, and you have three guys standing around the perimeter with Tucker in the dunker spot. Rob Williams ignores Tucker and is watching Embiid, who can't get close to the basket and settles for a fadeaway. 2 possessions later, Embiid has a face-up with Horford, and every Sixer is standing around the perimeter. Again, with Williams in the paint, Embiid doesn't want to challenge him and chooses to shoot the jumper again. So later in the second quarter, Doc puts Embiid in the middle of the floor, but with everyone standing around, Williams can still help, just enough for Embiid to take another jumper. My main point here is that a lot of the coach's input comes from putting guys in better positions to open up opportunities for stars. And as teams start figuring out your best plays, you have to learn to play more random but tactical basketball to find an open shot. And in those cases, it really comes down to very minor but impactful moves to create better shots. For example, to start the third quarter, Embiid gets a switch with Tatum and then gets doubled. But with Rob Williams watching Embiid, PJ Tucker then moves to the other side, so Tatum tells Williams to pick up Tobias Harris instead. With the shot clock winding down, Williams is looking to help on Embiid, but now Tobias Harris has the open shot, who's a much better shooter. This never happened again, as the Sixers went back to just posting Embiid up and having him navigate all the obstacles around the rim. This is where the clash with Doc and the Stars really come from. Doc believes that the Stars should be good enough to find their shots and perform up to standards. Stars believe that Doc doesn't use them properly and doesn't do enough to help the team elevate to its proper potential. Rightfully so, it's hard to really tell who's more responsible for the collapses, but if there's something we do know, it's that collapses have more so followed Doc throughout his career. Overall, I don't think Doc Rivers deserves to never coach again. He could draw up good plays and is really good at pumping confidence into role players and putting them in positions to succeed. And as a result, he's a great stepping stone for younger players that need some time for development to put the franchise on the right track. Unfortunately, he has never been interested in that sort of role. He's always followed the talent, and for the last decade, has experienced a lot more disappointment than success. And when he eventually stops coaching, this is what he's going to be remembered for, coming up short when it really matters most. So, hope you guys enjoyed this video. If so, please feel free to like and subscribe. Appreciate your guys' support, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace.